We are learning more and more about nervous system regulation these days, thanks to some incredible neuroscientists, experts, therapists, trauma healing research. And what we're coming to realize is that many of us have spent a lifetime dysregulated, which generally means we've been either hypervigilant or immobilized or both. Some form of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn in varying combinations. And this also often results from us not getting what we needed in developmental stages. Maybe we didn't have an attuned caregiver, or there was a lot of trauma in the lineage system. We didn't get calmed when we were hurting, or there was a sense of needing to be self-reliant very early on in our lives. And that resulted in an activated nervous system. And for many of us, that's been a chronic state. And from that, we often develop chronic illness, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or a combination of all of them. And very likely, this has been accompanied by attachment stress. We have a hard time trusting relationships, and the resulting struggles from that sort of compound and enhance the attachment stress and the dysregulation. And it's really hard to unlearn that when we don't know how, when we haven't been taught, when we don't really know the mechanics of it. One of my favorite definitions of trauma is from a man named Stephen Porges, who says that trauma is the chronic disruption of connectedness, the chronic disruption of connectedness. And to put this in really simple terms, the only way for us to heal and have the lives that we imagine is for our systems to feel safe and settled. That's really big. I used to think that this idea that stress is the leading cause of disease meant someone who had a really stressful life. And it is, but it's also that so many of us have adapted to a level of tension that we don't even recognize or register anymore because we're so used to it. That dysregulation, that chronic attachment, trauma. So many of us have low-grade, constant, consistent stress for all of our lives. And that is what is meant by stress is the leading cause of disease. So safety, what does it mean? What does it mean to get ourselves in a place of safety so that we can heal? We can't just tell ourselves that, like, look, I'm safe. There's no tiger, right? Because the complex wiring of the nervous system tells the brain, the body does the telling of the brain how it's doing. And the body doesn't speak with words, and it doesn't let go of the past until it feels our presence. And it can't be fooled, right? While it may not be running from a tiger at this moment, it's really not able to be in chill, languish, rest, digest, repair, connect mode because it's got all of this residual. There's a lot of neuro experts out there with very fancy systems, things like the polyvagal theory and the proprioceptive and vestibular stimulation, and all of them have fabulous protocols about how to get back to a place of ease in the system. But in very, very simple terms, it is how do we move from the drive to survive over to a willingness, desire, availability, and capacity to connect. That's what it means. Moving from survival to availability for connection. And this connection means with self, with others, with spirit, and with life, right? Some other words that have been used along these lines are a felt sense of safety. Inside of us, we feel safe. Another phrase that's wonderful is the window of tolerance, right? We're not too aroused and we're not too immobile. I love the one called tonic stillness. We have tone in our systems, but there's a stillness. Settled, neutral. I love the phrase from nonviolent communication, which is called calm alert or quiet aliveness. I also think of it as the receptive state. And this, we may have heard of the parasympathetic nervous system, right? The idea that we're rest, digest, as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system, where we're active and fighting off or fleeing from some kind of danger. And most of us have not known this parasympathetic window of tolerance place, this receptive place, this calm, alert place. And we certainly didn't know that we could create the conditions ourselves. Because the thing about dysregulation is that we are looking outside of ourselves. We're scanning for danger, and that becomes a chronic pattern, right? Animals, and we are animals, are scanning. Are we safe? Are we in danger? And the nervous system gets locked in that place. And so we're going to be talking about how, because we never really learned, we're going to be talking about how to repattern, rewire, and gear ourselves towards safety. In that place, we can enhance and accelerate our healing when we learn to be safe, and then beyond that to something that's called coherence. You'll notice that a lot of these practices that I'm offering and that neuroscience has been offering around regulation and healing is very counter to what culture tells us. What Western culture, American modern culture, industrial culture, you might have noticed, it guides us towards speed, productivity, and performance, right? And linear time in a pretty structured way. And these things, on a prolonged scale, enhance the dysregulation and the attachment traumas. And they are not our friends. Culture is really not our friend. And how it got that way is a whole other discussion. But honestly, it's a wake-up call and a shock to many of us that in order to heal, in order to become more alive, more whole, more ourselves, more connected to divinity, to essence, that we need to turn away from the very powerful and very compelling messages of culture in order to find those truths for ourselves. So much of the work out there is interpreted through science, neuroscience, even religion, therapeutic lens. I'm coming at this nervous system regulation through a tantric perspective. And what does that mean? Tantra is an ancient spiritual tradition with roots in Tibet and Nepal, and it's often described as sort of a non-dual or embodiment or sacred integration approach. And in its classic forms, Tantra uses practices like mantras and mudras and yantras. They meant to sort of awaken this trinity of body, mind, and spirit. Body, mind, and spirit. So in a broader perspective, Tantra is a worldview. And it sees everything, even what's typically rejected, as part of the divine. Every sensation, every emotion, every moment, it's part of the sacred whole. Nothing is outside of the field of belonging. The way I interpret it is that the body is a temple and a book of wisdom, and it views each one of us as a manifestation of divinity. And our desires, our sensations, all of it is a doorway to knowing ourselves more and becoming more fully ourselves here in this incarnation, right? To be heaven on earth, to be God embodied, right? God or goddess, whatever tradition is used. And that we've been given this life force for a reason. And then how do we begin to relate to it, honor it, understand it, work with it, and enjoy it? So this is a marriage of neuroscience, or at least my lay interpretation of attachment work, as well as learning to be regulated most primarily through a tantric lens. 7 practices that cultivate safety. This might be my favorite one, following impulses. It's crucial to shift a lifetime of controlling, forcing, overriding, manipulating the body. Instead of mind over matter, when we follow our impulses, we begin to build trust with the self. We find our yeses and nos authentically. And then we can trust ourselves, and other people can trust us. We start to listen for the truth of what's true in each moment. Whether that's, stopping what we're doing because we need a drink of water, or we need to pee, or we need to rest, or we need more activity. This is how we begin to repair internal attachment and move from dysregulation to regulation, and to tune in to the intelligence of instinct and intuition, which serves us in every area of life. And it's a prerequisite for tracking desire and pleasure, which is in the next section about coherence. Another practical step in the journey to cultivating safety is nourishing touch. Skin to skin, it's one of the oldest forms of medicine. Nourishing, non-demanding touch activates our oxytocin, reduces our cortisol, and it signals to the body that we're okay. Now that can be with self, right? Bare skin against skin, sleeping naked, or in the shower, or being even on the ground and putting a hand to the skin around the heart, putting the hands on the neck. We're being held or holding ourselves. It reminds us that we belong. And if that's easy and safe to do with another person, that is a beautiful way to parasympathetic regulation. Another tantric practice that cultivates safety is that all of us is welcome. All of our emotions are welcome. And specifically, we welcome them through the process of life force, or eros, the erotic life force. So allowing them all and then making them part of our celebration of life, right? How we move towards fear, let's say, with gentleness. So the antidote to fear is gentleness. That's a beautiful phrase from Richard Rudd. The antidote to grief is grieving. The antidote to pain is attention. The antidote to stress is to create more space, right? And we can do this with erotic presence. When we give emotion the divine, the divine presence it deserves, we let grief move, we let fear move, we let anger move, we stop pathologizing pain. Eros shows us the way to be the ocean amidst the waves. And we can create a capacity and breath and rhythm. And in this space, energy is in motion. That's emotion, energy in motion, and it's not something to fix. Relational safety and community, right? We heal in relationship, whether that's through eye-to-eye contact, steady presence, deep friendship. The nervous system says, I am safe because you are here. It allows the body to relax. And community holds the complexity of that, right? Without maybe the trauma or the struggle of attaching to one other person. This is a really big piece in most of the tantric practices I know, is that how can we be together in a coherent field? We build community. Another really important practice in the tantric lineage is awareness of energy centers, right? So we bring our attention and awareness to the chakra system. We realize that there's these plexus of nerves in different sections of the body, the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the thymus, the heart, the thyroid, and it's connected at each and every one of those places to glands. And this is both an anatomical regulation center as well as a mystical portal, which we'll get into more. And tuning into these gateways can give us a sense of how to move energy in the body, how to rely and rest in the heart when that's necessary, how to move energy up from the lower, subtle areas of the reproductive or survival chakras. And this is very helpful when we're trying to learn from consciousness. And knowing about them and establishing a relationship to them creates that baseline of safety. Grounding is another one. Learning to be in our feet, on the earth, having a weighted blanket, rocking, being barefoot, self-cradling. These are places that help us ground to the earth and to self-containment. Really big, important one. And then the last one is ritual, right? How do we create things that ground us or attach us to important aspects of our life, whether that's lighting a candle, chanting, bathing, caring for ourselves in certain ways. Having unstructured time and not accomplishing anything is one of my favorite rituals. And how can they be regular? How can we start to rely on them? Some people use prayer, sound, of anything that takes us into the sacred. So what do these 7 practices do for us? A couple of really important things. They allow us to start to somatically track, right? That we have a body and the body's an okay place to be. That we have a body and the body is an okay place to be. We learn that being here, little by little, is an okay experience without needing to be overwhelmed or overstimulated. And this is a huge, huge step. And another thing it does is it teaches us to receive and to trust. This receptivity is a huge component of Tantra. We cannot experience nourishment, beauty, and care in the world without learning to receive, right? When self-reliance and performance and productivity is on our minds, receptivity, restoration, and deeper coherence is impossible. So I encourage you to practice these pieces, and as we are safe, we soften, which is really important for moving into coherent states. Practices that deepen coherence through a tantric lens. If safety is the doorway, then coherence is the world beyond. Like Dorothy stepping into Oz, or like the children crossing through the wardrobe into Narnia. Coherence is where the ordinary becomes, where the body becomes a threshold to something vast, relational, and alive. Safety is an important first step, but coherence is where we begin to soar. And in nervous system terms, safety is the essential precondition for healing. It signals to the system that it can stop scanning for danger and begin to rest, digest, repair, and feel and relate. The foundational parasympathetic tone, where the body has that sense of connection, it's able to be soft and grounded, present, and really has capacity to return to the self, regardless of what's happening outside. But safety alone doesn't guarantee healing, right? It simply makes healing possible. And what catalyzes deeper transformation is this idea of coherence, a state where breath, emotion, movement, awareness, they begin to synchronize, right? In coherence, the body becomes the resonant field, and healing is self-organizing, right? The system is allowed to rewire from the inside out, assisted by the imaginal and mystical and regenerative forces that live in the realm of coherence in abundance. So, from the Tantric lens, coherence is not just about nervous system happenings, it's a spiritual alignment and unfolding. Tantra doesn't aim to eliminate stress, but to restore flow. And once flow is restored, it's the integrity of our life force. The field here is not neutral, it's alive, erotic, and intelligent. That's the nature or the definition that I'm working with for coherence. And here are 7 tantric practices that enhance and deepen coherence. Micro movements, subtle, slow, intuitive movements. They are far more effective for healing and for moving into coherence than large, muscular, forceful movements. We have pioneers like Emily Conrad from the continuum movement world that discovered that these tiny movements bypass trauma loops. They rehydrate fascia and tissues and the flow within us, and they help awaken to the body's original dynamism, really, the original brilliance. The research has showed that these electromagnetic field from intuned subtle movements responds more powerfully with these micro movements than any kind of intensity. This approach is echoed across somatic lineages. Feldenkrais, Alexander, body-mind centering. They say that doing less is doing, right? And micro movements help us learn to attune, like prayer to the body, a return to the body. Emily said, small movements carry the imprint of origin. In Tantra, we look towards undulation, which is a wave pattern in the spine, or in any system of the body, wave pattern that activates life force. Another principle is going inside and tuning in to the subtle body. As we re-enter the inside experience, turning our attention away from our external vigilance, we realize that there's a whole universe inside of here that teaches us consciousness, and it guides us authentically and naturally into coherence. It's also called somatic listening, as we enter the rhythm that's native to the earth and to us, right? The Schumann resonance, the native pulse of life, right? And instead of tracking out here, we begin to track in here. And then sensation ripens, and the quantum and imaginal realms are available to us, right? The right hemisphere of the brain takes over. We touch into archetypal imagery and sensations. The subtle body plays with spirals, waves, and loops, and fun. And in Tantra, we work with those patterns and enhance what's known as undulatory practice, right? Where the nervous system finds its way through waves and spirals into both the micro and the vast. And so here we get in touch with the pulse of life, the cosmic breath, the tidal wave, discovering our home frequency beneath the speed, performance, and productivity. And when we begin to taste this realm through whatever form, it rewires our sense and center of gravity. We no longer belong to cultural world. We belong to presence. And this realm doesn't reject the world. It just deconditions us from it. It's not about leaving the world. It's about finding a different tempo, a life-giving tempo. Another practice is delighting in sensation, right? This reshapes our reality. Sensuality is medicine. We are sense-driven beings. And when they're harnessed for tracking danger through vigilance, we don't get to enjoy what sensual beings we actually are. When we notice the senses and we revel and savor and delight, it's to say yes to life in this moment. It's an act of gratitude that the body understands. Gratitude practices are great, but rehearsing or verbalizing gratitude is not really helpful for the body. It really wants to savor, and celebrate and enjoy. And when we learn to practice through the warmth of sunlight on our face, or the texture of fabric, or the touch of a hand, or the slowing down after a busy day, eating after a long fast, sensuality reclaims the body from numbness, and over time it teaches us to live in a coherent state. It says life is sweet, life is good, life is trustworthy, life is ecstatic. There's an old story about a monk walking through the forest who's suddenly chased by a ferocious tiger, and he runs as fast as he can, but he comes right to the edge of a cliff. And when the tiger closes in, he sees a vine hanging on the edge of the cliff, just out of reach of the tiger, and he grabs it and he dangles. And he looks down and he sees another tiger down at the bottom waiting for him to fall. And to make matters worse, there's two mice, one black and one white, that begin gnawing at the vine that he's clinging to. And then out of the corner of his eye, the monk spots a perfectly ripe wild strawberry growing on the cliffside. And he plucks it and he puts it in his mouth and he says, "Oh, how delicious." So what is the meaning of this story? The cliff edge is the nervous system, the personality, the sympathetic structure that has us scanning, right? The mice are time, day and night, ticking away. And the tigers can be said are birth and death, right? We're woven between these two bookends, or past and future. But the strawberry is pleasure itself, its sensation, its beauty, its aliveness, even in the most precarious of moments, like incarnation, which seems sometimes like a lot of suffering for many of us. Another practice is slowing down. Across many traditions, scientific, mystical, somatic, esoteric, there's a shared recognition of a slower rhythm beneath ordinary time. In continuum movement, it's called biological or primordial time, right? That awareness that arises from the fluid system rather than will or habit, right? Sometimes the pace is so slow, it's imperceptible, right? Pre and perinatal work calls this baby time, a slowed down, spacious pace, attuned to the nervous system as it was designed, right? And here's where coherence, integration, and emergence are possible. The biodynamic cranial sacral people attune to the long tide, the 50-second wave beneath the breath and the heartbeat. It's much. Quantum field theory and coherence sciences describe it as the 0 point, the still point, the rest point, where coherence replaces effort of any kind. At the quantum level, time and space dissolve, allowing for this nonlinear, instantaneous communication that happens in that place. Psychedelic explorers call it cosmic time, right? Where insight blooms, where each path points to truth, right? Where the field reveals itself. And some spiritual or religious traditions call it stillness, or the eternal now, the be still and know. This is a contemplative place, the one that mystics call the speed of trust. Right? So another practice and principle is that desire and pleasure are doorways. In Tantra, they are not distractions from the path, they are the path. They are considered sacred technologies of embodiment, pleasure and desire. Pleasure shows us where aliveness lives. It's a compass that pulls us towards coherence, towards our truth, towards the erotic intelligence of life itself. At a practical level, pleasure reminds the nervous system that it's safe to feel, and desire is the movement of all life through us. It awakens longing, initiates creativity, points us towards that which wants to emerge at every moment. It is the creative matrix. And when we allow ourselves to feel pleasure and desire without shame or an agenda or preconceived notions, we tap into an ancient rhythm, one that says, life is meant to be felt. You are meant to enjoy being here. This is not indulgence. This is devotion. This is a devotional path. To follow what is deeply desired in life is to say yes to our embodied, right? It's the next step after following our impulses. Desire becomes our North Star, our guiding light, and our compass. Another practice is sound and vibration. They're ancient regulatory tools encoded into our biology. Our body itself is a resonant chamber, and we're told more and more that it's a frequency. More than mass or matter, it's a frequency. Blood vessels, our hearts, our organs are dancing, and they are creating sound like an underwater orchestra. Every cell responds to frequency. We can hum or tone or chant or sing or drum. Our breath sound combination, vibration travels through the tissues, shifting brain waves, relaxing fascia, unlocking energetic congestion and stagnation. In many lineages, sound is not just expression, it is medicine. It brings dissonance into harmony. In somatic and tantric practices, sound can repattern trauma and activate pleasure and induce mystical states. We make sound from the inside, and even the sound of our own voice is now known to regulate our own systems, especially when we can speak to ourselves with clarity and context and gentleness and love. And how do we let sound arise from us rather than forcing? We become instruments. In Tantra, our bodies are instruments, and our voice is a tuning fork that calls the body back into sacred rhythm. The last practice of nervous system regulation at the quantum or coherence level is connecting to the field. The field is a living, interconnected matrix within and around us. It's vibrationally intelligent and already coherent. It's the rhythm of the cosmos, and sometimes called the unified field, where everything exists in relationship. This is the dimension where the life responds to us through synchronicities, sensations, subtle knowings, and a really deep sense of belonging. Beyond felt sense, a knowing, and really tapped into the wisdom of the whole. In trauma and culture and dysregulation, we tend to collapse into separation. But when we connect to the field, we return to belonging at a very deep level. Some people see this as the space around the body that holds us and organizes us. And it does feel good to be held by something larger than our small selves. It's also in us, and we are it, right? I want to talk a little bit about how different traditions describe the field so that there's different entry points into understanding it. In the Tantric tradition, we call this spanda, the feminine principle, the primordial throb or pulse of consciousness that gives form to everything. The field isn't separate from us. It is around us, inside of us. It is us. It's alive and erotic and nature and creative, always inviting us into kind of a sense of union. Animist traditions or indigenous traditions, the field is kin, a living web of relatives, living and dead, the elements, past, present, and future. The world tree or the center pole is often called in shamanic traditions, where everything is connected, middle, lower, upper worlds. The field listens and responds, and when we are in right alignment, it supports us. Midline traditions, the biodynamic cranial sacral world, really has done a great job defining the field that lives within our midline. It's a vertical axis of stillness within us that in embryology we are formed around it, right? It is the spark of life, that organizing principle, the place where life force flows and where form arises. The field is quiet and central and organizing, and it's our original blueprint of wholeness. The non-dual or more meditative traditions, the field is pure awareness, pure emptiness, or beingness, right? Not something we can reach or create. It's what we are when we lose the illusion of separation. There is just observer, observed, and it's all the one same thing. The field is perceiving itself. In quantum physics, again, we talked about this, the 0 point, still point, rest point, the energetic substrate from which all matter arises. Non-linear, instantaneously alive and connected, teeming with potential. I love Joe Dispenza, who does a great job at blending this neuroscience and quantum mysticism together. And he talks about this space beyond matter, beyond time, where all possibilities exist as waves until they are observed and brought into form. And he teaches that when we move beyond the self into the field, that we have access to the highest possible expression of who we are. Nature is probably one of the most consistent, most reliable, most tangible points of access to the field because it's undeniable. It lives in everything, the wind, the tides, the trees, the animals, a living, breathing example of interdependence, coherence, non-separation. And when we immerse ourselves in the natural world, our systems begin to attune to this inherent order. Because there's no fragmentation there. There's no resistance. And some everyday language, right? Some people call this love, God, spirit, universe. Others know it as just a feeling, right? And it's less important, really, what we call it. It's a body level knowing that we are not alone. Mystical Christianity sees it as the divine, the ground of being, and the eternal. And really the way to get there is surrender, right? Surrender and many of these other principles in the coherence category, right? These are the doorways to access the field. And the field is the way to access these mystical states where we can heal beyond what we thought possible. Or we can come to peace with death, where we make sense of existence. Make sense and not make sense. To be anchored and to be unmoored all at the same time. So what's the outcome of coherence practices and of spending time in a resonant, coherent state? It's what I call mystical embodiment. More here and more dissolved. It's the ultimate of paradoxes. Mystical embodiment is the natural outcome of sustained coherence. So beyond safety, right? It's not a goal, not a peak state, not something to strive towards, but a frequency the body remembers when it feels safe, attuned, and alive. It's what emerges when the boundary between self and the field softens. Not through any kind of effort, but through deep opening and surrender. It's a here and not here experience where our presence becomes so full, so saturated, and that we're so aware of the minute that we begin to melt into the infinite and into the formless. In this state, we are rooted in the body more than ever before. We can track sensation and breath and gravity. We feel ourselves, and yet we also feel expansive, luminous, and porous. We're not escaping the body here. This is not dissociation. It's blueprint, how we are meant to feel, what we are meant to have access to. You are becoming the cosmos through the body. It is a sense of involution. The spirit, soul, the field descends into the form. It's ecstatic coherence, where both the self is infinite and animal, breathing and being breathed, right? Mystical embodiment is where the nervous system no longer organizes around protection, but it also no longer organizes around safety either. It's beyond that. Let's call it illumination. It's where time becomes timeless, where it dilates, where the body begins to take us somewhere, kind of a sacred intelligence where healing and wisdom converge and everything is elastic. In Tantra, we can access these states without substances, right, through many of these practices. And we realize it's the gateway to our artistry and our everything we want, right? Healing, belonging, wisdom, not just in form, but because now we have access to myth, to spirit, to archetypes, to the field. And again, anchored and unmoored, tasting the sacred in the impermanence. Rumi, says things like, this is not the Oxus River or some little creek. This is the shoreless sea. Here, swimming ends always in drowning. This is what he's talking about. We lose ourselves in the shoreless sea. So this is something the body reveals when it's no longer bracing, rushing, protecting, proving, performing, producing, right? It's the inevitable flowering of a system that has returned to its rhythm, its reverence, and to what's real. We cannot bypass the body. We need to do it through the body. And thankfully, these neuroscientific anchors really help us understand how to do that, right? To get home while we're here. The kind of homecoming that dissolves the illusion of separation and leaves the dissolution of the self into the whole. And as a teacher of death and impermanence, through the pathway of ecstasy, this is the best way to describe it. And I will just say briefly that this is deeply grounded in scientific research and both, ancient experiential traditions, that mystical embodiment, these states of coherence, of expanded awareness, of interconnected presence, they accelerate, enhance, and amplify our healing. Joe Dispenza has done incredible research, right? It's some of the most rigorous in these realms, right? Of these physiological outcomes, that elevated states, gratitude, love, and presence produce beta or high beta brain waves, right? That change immune markers, and people with chronic illness report radical healing, right? This is also happening in the Heart Math Institute and the biodynamic cranial sacral work, right? The psychedelic sciences. And these folks are measuring things like brainwave activity and heart rate variability and immune biomarkers and units of distress. And they're seeing incredibly qualitative shifts. I love that stuff. It's very geeky, but I'm coming at this from a spiritual tradition that's quite old and ancient and had these things very figured out. So thankfully, we live in a time where we can combine the ancient and the modern and really move into these states of mystical embodiment through these practices of coherence. Thanks for being with me on this journey, and I hope you are receiving benefit.